Ladies and gentlemen, our program will be commencing shortly. We invite you now to take your seats and switch your communication devices to the silent mode. Thank you.
Well, Your Excellencies, Ministers, Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you all for your attendance and enthusiastic participation. I look forward soon to open the fourth plenary session of the IISS Shangri-La Dialogue this year. But I would like first to thank very warmly President Halima Yaqub and all the staff of the Astana for having so graciously hosted us last night for dinner at the Astana, and also the staff of the RSIS for having made the arrangements so wonderfully for us last night. We have a very full program again this morning with 6 full defense ministers speaking to us in 2 plenary sessions. And I'm very proud this morning that in our 4th plenary session, the first to kick off our Sunday morning proceedings on the theme New Dimensions of Terrorism and Counter-Terrorism, we have a representative from the Middle East, a representative from Asia, and a representative from Europe. So if there was ever a more elegant statement of the interdependence in today's world and the linkages between different geographies. The way in which our program this morning has been organized is a great testament to that. And I will ask each of the speakers to speak in the order in which they appear in our program, and then, as has become customary, we'll have 35 or 40 minutes of discussion and Q&A in order to engage in that dialogue for which this summit is so famous. And I'll introduce them first and then ask them each to speak. First, our good friend Dr. Khalid bin Mohammed Attiyah, who is the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of State for Defense of Qatar. He's attended a number of IISS events in the past. He has great experience as a human rights lawyer and also as a pilot of, I think, French aircraft, and has been in his position for a number of years. Major General Delfin Lorenzana is the Secretary of National Defense of the Philippines, and has been in the lead in that difficult and challenging struggle against ISIL in his own country, and particularly in Marawi. And our good friend also Dr. Ursula von der Leyen, Federal Minister of Defense of Germany, who has attended a number of IISS events as well, and with whom we engage on a regular basis. And I should say that I hope sometime in the near future that in addition to having IISS headquarters in London, an office in North America, an office in the Middle East, an office in Asia, that we hope we will have an office in continental Europe and in Berlin, and we are working steadily in that direction. I think our first step, to borrow the language of NATO, is that we will have a rotational presence in Berlin, having numerous events and people going there, and then hopefully establish ourselves on a permanent basis there. So 3 great friends of the IISS, 3 extraordinary representatives of their region, and with that preface, could I invite first Dr. Khalid bin Mohammed Attiyah to address the Shangri-La Dialogue. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Chapman, for the kind introduction. Honored guests, fellow Minister, Excellency, it is a truly pleasure and privilege to be here with you. I have long been a fan of the IISS and thank the organization of this prestigious 3-day event for giving us here today a unique opportunity to come together to discuss issues that are relevant to us all. I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to the government of Singapore for their warm welcome and gracious hospitality. The Shangri-La Dialogue has emerged as a preeminent regional security forum, one that creates a solid platform where geostrategic security and defense policymakers from around the globe can converge to share ideas and exchange perspective on the greatest security challenges facing the Asian-Pacific region and beyond. I think Prime Minister Modi's keynote address truly set the stage for our discussion of the past 2 days by outlining the security challenges and opportunity that this region and the rest of the world face going forward. Speaking with my colleagues in the past about the Shangri-La Dialogue, many have shared what a great learning opportunity this forum has been for them. Having engaged in the dialogue myself, I am now privy to the wealth of idea and innovative solution to today's challenges that the participants and organization of the wonderful event have developed. I'm especially eager to engage in today's session surrounding the topics of terrorism and counter-terrorism. The state of Qatar has been at the forefront of this battle for many years now, and we unfortunately have known firsthand the horror and panic that ensues in the aftermath of the terrorist attack. Often following such horrendous events, anger and fear takes charge. We seek to punish those who wronged use in a swift and forceful manner. We devise strategies that deal with the immediate aftermath of the attack, often overlooking vital preventive strategies that could have aid in circumventing such catastrophes. Terrorists and terrorist organizations are constantly evolving their tactics in an effort to spread fear and mayhem. They have devised strategies to move across borders, undetected, recruit the young and impressionable, and bypass monetary law to funnel money in an effort to serve their malicious action. The recent deadly attack in Leyen is a heartbreaking example of the continued violence that plagues the security and safety of all of us. The cancer of terrorism, if left untreated, will continue to mutate and spread across the body, damaging every healthy cell in its way. My region, the Middle East, similar to the region, has been plagued by this malignant phenomena for decades. A phenomena that has resulted in eclipsing economic growth, strangling social and political progress, and deterring development policies in many areas of the world. We are confronted today with multiple manifestations of this evil. Our enemies no longer have a face, and we no longer know their names. They cower behind computer screens and hide in mountains and deserts, scheming to spread their hateful agenda and plotting their next violent acts. As they evolve, we too must evolve. We must go beyond the spectacle to address the cause and drive of this evil. We must act now to not only fortify our borders, but our mind and the mind of our youth. We need to adopt policies of inclusion and economic reform to build a better future for our children. A future filled with hope, hope of better life, of growth, and of peace and security. Qatar has joined its friends and allies in the global fight against terrorism, stemming from our conviction that terrorism, however it manifests and wherever it strikes, has a determined effect on all of us. We are all susceptible to this evil, and therefore we must all work in concert to eradicate its form of existence. Qatar has spared no effort in this fight against evil. We have dedicated our financial, technical, and logistical resources toward preventing violent extremism and cutting off terrorist funding. As a member of the United Nations, the State of Qatar has implemented all Security Council resolutions and penalties in regard to terrorist and terror financing. Our law and legislation have been constructed in a manner that allow us to constantly evolve and amend in an effort to remain ahead of any criminal or extremist activities. Qatar also remains an active member in the international coalition against ISIS, contributing greatly in the fight to dismantle and destroy ISIS. For decades, we have determined that the root cause of terrorists is this or that. We have unilaterally channeled our energy to tackle what we believe would be the core for this evil. However, through discussion such as the one we are having here and learning from recent events, we have come to the realization that there is no such thing as a singular root cause for this phenomenon. Numerous components contributed to the creation of an enemy. Feeling of alienation, economic disparities, social inequality, and political exclusion have all proven to be leading drivers in the recruitment of terrorists and the increase of terrorist attacks. That is why we have long urged the international community to address this concern multilaterally. Qatar has joined forces with countries such as Switzerland, the United States, the European Union, Japan, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and others to establish the Global Community Engagement and Resilience Fund, a fund dedicated to provide local community-level initiative focused on strengthening resilience against violent extremist agenda through cooperating with government, civil society, organization, and the private sector to support national strategies that aim to address the cause of violent extremists. The fund is currently active in countries such as Myanmar, Mali, and Bangladesh. Qatar, ladies and gentlemen, has taken the fight against extremists beyond the battlefield and into the classroom. Through organizations such as Education Above All and Educate a Child, we have been able to provide primary education to over 10 million out-of-school children across the world, empowering our young and equipping them with tools necessary to circumnavigate the often turbulent and unpredictable world will aid in preventing them from falling prey to extremist group and ideology. Further, Qatar Funds for Development has recently signed an MOU with the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, UNRWA, in the amount of $50 million dedicated toward the safeguard of the Palestinian refugee children, access to education in the West Bank, Gaza, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. As leader in the global fight against terrorism, we must work tirelessly to uphold and enforce the rule of law and maintain the value of human rights and the freedom that we all share. This core value unite us in the face of our enemies and ensures our victory over those who wish to derail and isolate us. The State of Qatar has proudly and firmly aligned itself with the principle of just peace, international cooperation, and human rights. We have rallied in support of disenfranchised and oppressed and have worked with our global partner in a cooperation with the United Nations agencies and civil society organizations to bring financial and humanitarian relief whenever it's needed. Nevertheless, a year ago, the State of Qatar and its people woke up to find themselves ambushed by being subject to an unjust, unlawful blockade. During the first day of our holiest month of Ramadan, we were suddenly deprived of our food and medicine sources and left to find ourselves. This blatant violence to international law include the principle of non-interference and conflict settlement through peaceful means and the obligation to respect and to protection of a human right and preservation of human dignity, as well as the Chicago Convention and the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, demonstrated the ruthlessness of policies taken against the State of Qatar. The blockading country continued to mobilize all means available to them. Politicians, poets, religious, clerks, actors, singers, and writers were all militarized in the attack against the State of Qatar. They did not stop there. The blockade country passed an observe preventing their own people from expressing any form of sympathy toward Qatar and defined penalties into a sentence of 3 to 5 years in prison and fines for up to $150,000 US. This obstruction were aimed to weaken our economy position and puncturing our social fabric. However, through the unwavering resilience of the Qatari people and the sound leadership of His Highness the Emir, we were able to weather the storm and emerge from it stronger than ever before. In the years since the blockade was imposed, our production of national product, including medicine and food, have grown exponentially. We have built on our bilateral relation and have explored the new and promising partnership to grow and develop. toward our national vision of development and social prosperity. We are strongly today than where we were a year ago. And as we prepare to commemorate the one-year anniversary of the blockade, a year of resilience and strength, a year of resolve and bravery, we must give thanks to those countries that have stood with us against this aggression and in favor of the rule of law and the principle of international law. Those identified the urgency of upholding the power of law over enforcing the law of power, as His Highness the Emir often says. Collectively, we are stronger by taking advantage of such opportunity where we come together and exchange intelligent information and experience. We can build a safer tomorrow for us all. Again, thank you all, and I look forward to fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Khalid, many thanks for those remarks, and I think particularly important at the start was your thought that there was no single root cause to the problem of terrorism, and that education was an important element in ensuring against that risk being inculcated, especially in the young. Before I move to the next speaker, I realized that I had failed to make my traditional housekeeping comment, which is that those of you who wish to ask questions or make comments need to tap your name badge on the left side of the microphone unit, press the touch screen either left or right depending on where you're sitting, and then press the silver button. Your microphone will alight and you will be in the queue. Your microphone won't be on, only I can turn it on, but I've received a couple of text messages from people saying they would like to ask a question, but remember that you have to go through those 3 steps in order to be on my list. So thank you very much for doing that if you want to have the floor. And with that, could I please invite our good friend Secretary Lorenzana to address the dialogue. Thank you, sir.
Excellencies, fellow ministers, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am honored to attend for the first time the Shangri-La Dialogue and be with defense and security professionals from all over the Asia-Pacific region. I would like to thank the IISS, headed by Dr. John Chipman, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share my perspective on terrorism and listen to others on various security concerns affecting our region. My thanks also goes to the Singapore government for the warm welcome and excellent accommodation. Terrorist organizations and the false narratives continue to threaten the global community. The attacks in Marawi last year and in Surabaya recently by Daesh-inspired groups reflect new dimensions of militancy and religious fundamentalism in Southeast Asia. This is most pronounced in the terrorist organizations' increasingly lethal and more ambitious tactical innovations, as well as shifts in their patterns of recruitment, which demonstrate their increasing operational sophistication. Allow me to expound on this disconcerting development based on the lessons that we learned from Marawi. First, what we are facing today is a new phase of full-fledged urban warfare led by Daesh-inspired groups. In the hopes of establishing a wilayat or a governorate in East Asia, we have turned attention to urban centers. The question that we have asked ourselves is, why Marawi? Why would Hapilon Isnilon, the designated emir in Southeast Asia, would move from the island of Basilan to Marawi? Two things. Marawi is the only Islamic city in the Philippines, and it is located in a predominantly Muslim province of Lanao del Sur. It was the intention of the terrorists to rally the city to their cause that will spread to the entire province of Lanao del Sur. The 5-month-long, it did not happen. They were not able to rally the Muslim population because the Muslim population fled the city. The 5-month-long siege highlights a tactical shift from guerrilla to built-up areas. In addition to funds from the Middle East, their financial support from the proceeds of illicit drug trade demonstrates the nexus between terrorism and transnational crime. The terrorists in Marawi tried to replicate what the Daesh did in Mosul and Raqqa. Urban warfare carries its own tactical advantages. Crowded urban spaces make it difficult for government forces to distinguish fighters from non-combatants, while allowing the terrorists to launch surprise attacks from different directions. Furthermore, waging war in cities increases the risk of large-scale civilian casualties and population displacement, hindering all-out offensive from government forces. Even when the civilians left Marawi, the clearing operation was slow, costly, and tedious. Troops had to do it building to building, street to street, day in, day out. The total government casualties in the Marawi siege was 165 killed and more than 1,000 wounded soldiers and policemen. This did not include the civilians that were killed and also the terrorists. Second, we are witnessing new patterns of recruitment from Daesh-inspired organizations. The recruits in Southeast Asia are educated, young, and from middle-class backgrounds. Most recent attacks in Indonesia have also shown the advent of so-called family terrorists, where whole family, men, women, and children, are recruited to carry out attacks. Most disturbing is their willingness to conduct suicide bombing. This is a new development in Southeast Asian region and something that local terrorists has never done before. Many of the recent recruits were drawn to radicalism and militancy through exposure to digitally communicated terrorist ideologies. The Mauti brothers, who led the Marawi siege, were part of this new breed, young, charismatic, educated, and with extensive ties in the Middle East. In fact, some of them studied in the Middle East. They were also adept in social media to propagate and disseminate messages of hatred and violence, as well as proliferate and deepen anti-government sentiments among certain sections of the society. This leads me to my third point. The use of technology has increased the sophistication of terrorist operations. Cyberspace has now become a new battlefield between the forces of order and terror. The digital revolution, which enables instantaneous communication in a highly unregulated and borderless domain, has given terrorist groups as well as lone actors a covert, efficient, and practically cost-free means to reach a wider audience. Daesh and its affiliates are known to exploit multimedia and short messaging services and social media platforms to choreograph operations and promote their narratives. We suspect that as we improve our cybersecurity operations, local terrorists have been forced to migrate to the darknet to conduct their business. Furthermore, the terrorist financing is aided by the growing use of digital currencies and mobile payment transactions, which offer a high degree of anonymity with minimal regulatory oversight. We estimate that at least $1.5 million was sent by Daesh to finance the Marawi attack through electronic transfer. Advancements in equipment and weaponry have likewise enabled militants to launch assaults in a substantial scale. In Marawi, militants use radio frequency scanners and unmanned aerial vehicles for surveillance and advanced firearms, including heavy and light rifles, rocket-propelled grenades, and sniper rifles with thermal imaging scopes. They also manufactured and used large amounts of improvised explosive devices. We recognize that the challenges do not end when the military declares victory. Thanks to the sacrifice of our brave soldiers and the timely assistance from our neighbors and allies, the Daesh-affiliated groups have failed to establish a foothold in southern Philippines. Yet, their initial accomplishment in Marawi provide a viable blueprint for terrorists across the region. As I speak, remnants of the Maoti group who managed to escape from Marawi are seeking new recruits. To win the war against extremism, we must develop capabilities against the increasing lethality available to terrorist groups and the tactical advantages offered in urban setting. We need to establish a rapidly deployable combined military force, a quick response team that's trained and properly equipped in 21st century urban warfare. Special forces with hostage rescue capabilities will enable us to save more lives. We should endeavor to reach international agreements that regulate cyberspace and affirm that the rule of law applies online as well as offline. Aside from cooperation among our governments, we should also encourage collaboration with and support from the private sector to filter, detect, and remove contents that incite terrorist acts and deal with the challenge of encrypted services in pursuit of public safety. We must continue to engage and cooperate with each other on an institutionalized basis. Regional platforms such as the EDMM and EDMM Plus, the ASEAN Regional Forum, the East Asia Summit, provide venues to share experiences on and enhance understanding of the terror threats that we all face. Meanwhile, other sub-regional efforts such as the trilateral cooperative arrangement of the Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia, the Our Eyes initiative led by Indonesia, and sub-regional defense ministers meeting on counter-terrorism convened by Australia enable direct stakeholders to address immediate security concerns. Aside from regional and international cooperation, allow me to emphasize the importance of a multi-sectoral approach within one's country. The Marawi siege exposed the presence of radicalized Muslims, young and old, which could be attributed to the influx of hardline, ultra-conservative Islamic preachers or missionaries that goes back as far as the 1980s. Many Muslim families who were able to obtain funds established their madrasas or Islamic schools in their homes with little supervision from the Department of Education. Some of these schools were operated by those with extremist Islamic beliefs. Recognizing the important role of the madrasas, the Philippine government has sought to develop and institutionalize the madrasa system by formulating a standard curriculum for public schools and privately run madrasas, an initiative that was initiated in 2004 but being implemented only in fall recently. We also need vigilant law enforcement agencies. For instance, our Bureau of Immigration is monitoring visiting clerics that comes from countries with history of ultra-conservatism. We likewise need to amend our existing counter-terrorism laws to enhance the effectiveness of security and enforcement agencies. Aside from cooperation with education and law enforcement sectors, we need a whole-of-nation approach to implement de-radicalization programs by involving Muslim religious and traditional leaders, local elected officials, and other stakeholders. We have likewise drawn lessons and best practices and experiences from our neighbors, namely Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei Darussalam. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to end my remarks by stating that there is no guaranteed formula to suppress and end the scourge of terrorism. Despite all our best efforts, it will be with us for some time to come. But if we continue to closely collaborate and cooperate, we will eventually eradicate it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Defense Minister, and in particular also for reminding us the increasing sophistication that some of the terrorists operating in this region have attained, UAVs and the like, and I think that is one of the challenges that face those groups that are trying to, those countries rather, that are trying to meet this challenge. Could I now ask the German Defense Minister, Ursula von der Leyen, to address us and give us her perspectives? Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, Excellencies, fellow ministers. It's good to be back in Shangri-La Dialogue. Here we can directly see and feel the extraordinary dynamics of the Asian world, dynamics that encompass economy and society, science and innovation, and also international security policy. They are the dynamics of opportunities and modernity, and at the same time the dynamics of risks and threats. In Europe, the situation is similar. I was last here in 2015, 3 years ago. At the time, in Europe, neither Brexit referendum had happened, nor had we experienced the refugee crisis or heard the many new voices that favor unilateralism over multilateralism. The brutish force of ISIL terror had not reached the hearts of our cities, nor was there the utmost urge that we, Europe, do more for our own security at last. Only 3 years on, the Europe that I left to speak to you today is no longer the same. Within the European Union, we had to reassure ourselves of who we are. We have come out stronger. We have spoken more honestly about solidarity and our values than in decades. We stand united in promoting free trade and opposing protectionism. We're fighting together for global agreement on climate change. We are reinforcing the common protection of our external borders, and we have understood that we need to take more ownership for security on our continent in our own interest. Europe, which for a long time has been perceived as a purely economic and trade power, now has started what it takes to become a truly relevant partner in security and defense. We have started the European Defense Union, a strong, comprehensive European pillar within our transatlantic alliance. The European Defence Union will enable better common planning for armed forces, smarter common investment in capabilities, and faster and better coordinated military action. We have already begun to fill the European Defence Union with life. My government's ultimate goal is to have an army of Europeans. While countries will continue to have national armed forces, those will be fully interoperable and compatible with each other. And there is a reason for all this. We know that we, as European nation states, in the long term, will only remain truly relevant if we join forces. The geopolitical shifts and the demographic realities in Europe speak a very clear language. Only if we join forces will Europe become a more relevant global partner, a more relevant partner also for our friends here in Asia. We had to take these steps, not least because our security situation has changed dramatically in recent years. Our big neighbor, Russia, is increasingly projecting power with military means. Most recently, Ukraine was the victim of this. What Russia puts into question is one of the very fundamental principles, the rules-based order, rules to be respected by all countries, be they big or small. This principle we will by no means abandon. At the same time, we are faced with an arc of crisis stretching from West and North Africa to the Near and Middle East, with unstable and fragile states, civil wars, genocide, displacement, misery and hardship, and with brutal terrorism that combines archaic objectives and state-of-the-art methodologies. How to deal with all this? There are 5 thoughts I would like to share with you. First, there is truth in the saying, it takes a network to fight a network. Translated into concrete terms, this means we must intensely coordinate our national instruments of law enforcement, diplomacy, economy, development policy and the military, and then apply a well-tailored and targeted mix of measures. Internationally, we need to cooperate even closer in our respective regional organizations and alliances. In other words, terrorism that uses diverse hybrid means requires a hybrid response, a hybrid defense. In some places we are doing this already, for example within the coalition against terror to defeat ISIL. We fight with military means, yet reconstruction and stabilization are part of our planning right from the start. It is exactly these military and humanitarian efforts that we need if we want to avoid hopelessness and despair turning into radicalization and violence. When poverty grows radicalization, it's human security, education, and jobs which foster reconciliation, stability, and peace. Second, we have to win the battle for attention. ISIL's recruitment strategies are advanced and highly professional. 90% of its propaganda is distributed through visual content. It appeals to the emotional level by using imagery and music, which skillfully replicate the aesthetics of popular video games. We have to be smart in our response. We need to develop our own narrative and communicate the openness of our societies, our respect for other cultural, religious, and national traditions in a powerful and modern way. At the same time, we need to address, expose, and disprove the false arguments of terrorist organizations and be convincing, particularly to young people. Third point, we have to strengthen fragile countries and regions that are vulnerable to terrorism, help them build resilience. This means that we need to enable and empower them to assume responsibility for their own security. The fight against terror needs a local face. We are making a tangible contribution to this with a number of projects, for example in Jordan and Tunisia, or for example in Iraq, or by supporting the G5 Sahel Force Conjointe in West Africa. Fourth point, terror needs money and communication. This is why we have to disrupt the terrorist channels of communication and financing. We are working hard on this already, especially in the global coalition against ISIL. We formed working groups to coordinate our strategic communication and counter-financing. We have to take concerted action to combat black market operations, the cashing in of hostage-taking, and art theft even more effectively. Fifth and last point, the return of fighters harbors an enormous risk. Those individuals are combat-proofed, radicalized, often traumatized and brutal, and they are mobile. This is why we in Germany have taken numerous measures to prevent departures to join ISIL, to prosecute foreign fighters, and to invest in prevention and de-radicalization. For us, this topic is one of the very top security challenges. It needs highest attention and a continued unified effort across the continents. Finally, one principle holds with regard to all actions in the fight against transnational terrorism. The rule of law and our values must be respected. because human rights and the rule of law apply even to the worst criminals. At the end of the day, we will only succeed if we steadfastly defend this fundamental of principles. The power of law must prevail over the law of power. My country stands for this principle, and so does Europe. This principle is at the root of our firm conviction that we can best protect our security through reliable and rules-based multilateral cooperation. Thank you for having me here.
Dr. von der Leyen, thank you very much. I noted three elegant aphorisms for counterterrorism policy in your remarks. First, it takes a network to fight a network. Second, the fight against terror needs a local face. Third, the power of law must prevail over the law of power. And I think those are three very elegant phrases that also encapsulate very powerful strategies. So thank you for those. The debate is now open. I have a number of people on my list that I can accommodate more. We'll take 4, 5, or 6 comments and questions from the floor and then return to the panel. First from Indonesia, Dr. Sylvia Yazid.
Thank you, Dr. Chipman. Speakers, since we are talking to a topic on new dimensions of terrorism and counter-terrorism, I would like to highlight a dimension which needs to be considered in determining actions to be taken. It is the gender dimension, with the increased involvement of women and with them, of course, children. While preventive actions are obviously important, we also need to come up with effective approaches in dealing with the surviving members of the families. Because I believe if not taken care properly, they may turn into sleeping threats, which we have to deal with in the future. Also, an effort of de-radicalization by sending them back to the community might not be effective when the community themselves have strong views and disappointments. And the digital world continue to feed radical views. I would like to hear the speaker's views on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from Malaysia, Jozan Hazadir.
Yes, question for Secretary Lorenza. This is on the trilateral air and sea patrol. What has been the results? Are these patrols showing real effects in addressing the situation in the region? And two, where are these? How are these patrols going to evolve, particularly in relations to the participation by regional countries and extra-regional countries? What is the stand of the three partner nations on this?
Thank you. François Hesbourg.
Yeah, thank you very much. My question will be to the three panelists, and I want to thank them for their very thoughtful presentations. Back in 1978, Zbigniew Brzezinski came up with the concept of the arc of crisis, which was mentioned again here this morning. So that was 40 years ago. In 2002, at the first Shangri-La Dialogue, Minister Mentor, as he then was, Lee Kuan Yew, gave a very powerful speech about the threat from Al-Qaeda, notably in the form of a major plot which had been uncovered against Singapore at the time. So this was, 16 years ago. In 2034, will we still be talking about jihadi terrorism? In 2058, will we still be talking about the arc of crisis? And my question is the following, and it's in the form of a spoiler alert. Will we have the strategic patience to work in such a long-term perspective, or will our public opinions stronger, more decisive action. Because after all, it has been decades now that we've had the arc of crisis, decades now that we've had the threat of jihadi terrorism. Thank you.
Many thanks. And from Japan, Hiroyuki Akita. No. I might come back to you. I'll ask Tim Huxley for the moment.
Oh, now it is working right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Please, my question is to Philippine Defense Minister. My question is quite a basic question, but how is the Asian Muslim population's perception to the West and changing in recent years, especially since war in Iraq or Afghanistan, and most recently Trump administration's policy to Middle East or its immigration policy, how those are affecting to those perceptions? And lastly, what can we do to ease the tension, if it exists, is the tension between Asian Muslim populations and West? Thank you.
Tim Huxley.
Thank you, John. My question is for Secretary Lorenzana. The limited but lengthy local war that resulted last year from the seizure of a large part of Marawi city by the Maute group and associated terrorists, including many from outside the Philippines, was, I think, an important wake-up call for governments in Southeast Asia regarding the evolving nature and potential scale of the terrorist threat in this region. Responding to that siege was evidently a major challenge for your armed forces. Are you able to say with confidence that a repeat of the Marawi event is now unlikely? And in particular, could you possibly say something about progress with the reforms, retraining and restructuring within the AFP that will provide you with the necessary rapid deployment force that you mentioned in your very interesting address? Thank you very much.
Many thanks. I'll take one more in this round, then go back. From Russia, Professor Alexander Nikitin.
Yes, question to German State Minister, Ms. Leyen. How can we avoid repeating old mistakes? I mean that in relations between NATO and Russia in the past 2 decades, Russia was not given a seat at the decision-making table of the European security, and that led Russia to the steps that you consider a challenge. Now, when, as you say, Europe is forming and shaping the new European Defence Union, can we inbuild into its principles and mechanisms a positive interaction with Russia, at least a dimension like fight against terrorism? That is a common task for Western and Eastern nations. By the way, Russians are the largest European nation, with 120 million of Russians living in the European part of Russia. Germans are the second largest European nation. And can we build European Defence Union without the largest European nation? Thanks.
Thank you. So perhaps I'll come back to the panel and go in the same order. Khalid, if you have any thoughts on what has been asked, and then Secretary Lorenzana and Secretary van der Leyen.
Yes, thank you, Doctor. I just wanted to go quickly on the comment by Dr. Hesberg on the 1978 to 2034 thing. And yes, I think if we don't be proactive, I think we will reach to 2034 as where we are today. But I believe if we want to fix the neighborhood, we should start with our home first. And our home, in our case today, is the Security Council. We need to fix the Security Council so everybody in line. And I said in my keynotes that we have to use the power of law rather than leaving it unlashed, and everybody is using the law of power these days. So here is the starting point, and then we can touch on all the points that our colleagues has mentioned. The hard way is a way, a very important way to combat, terrorism, but at the same time, development, prosperity, and most important is to restore hopes among our youth from today and not tomorrow. I think we should start. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to address the first question, gender dimension of the problem of terrorism in surviving members and the radicalization. First, the gender dimension, like women and the women, is actually being addressed. This has brought to our attention while Marawi was still going on, and we have the mechanism, I believe, to address the gender dimension of the terrorism problem, because we believe that the homes, which is marriage by mothers and women, still form part of an important part of our fight against terror. The surviving members of the Mao, 27 of them already surrendered or came back to the folds of the law, and we are trying to rehabilitate them also in their community. Well, there was fears that was expressed a while ago that putting them back in the community might be counterproductive. We recognize that because a lot of the other people that were affected by the siege are actually mad at least people. So we are very, very careful in bringing them immediately, or maybe we could rehabilitate them somewhere else and bring them back later. The question on trilateral patrol, what are the results? The results are encouraging. The part of the Sulu Sea have been the site of a lot of kidnappings before, but since we established the trilateral cooperative patrols, the maritime and aerial patrols, there has not been any kidnapping again. So it is it's working. Will it evolve? Will we have more participants? Yes, we will get. I think Brunei is waiting in the wings to be involved, and also Singapore. Now, we would like to involve Singapore because of their experience in establishing the intelligence fusion in the Malacca Strait, and we would like that to be replicated in the Siboto Strait. Yeah. The question on will we have strategic patience, the question about the continuing problems of radicalization of jihadists. Will we have a jihadi problem in 2058? Will we have strategic patience, or do we need the more decisive action? I think that will be up to this government, our governments in our association to discuss, because the way I look at it, the way the terrorism is being addressed, piecemeal, I think they will be with us for a long time to come. There's another one directed to me. Wake-up call about the Marawi. Will it be repeated in some cities in the Philippines? Well, the likelihood of being repeated is still there. But what we did after Marawi is to strengthen the cities in Mindanao, like Zamboanga City, Cotabato, Davao. But before that, there was this explosion in Davao in September 2016. That was before Marawi. And it seems to be working. The local executives, the mayors, are working hard to prevent the occurrence of Marawi in their area. How can we avoid the same mistake? By learning from it. Thank you.
Yes, I want to answer to the three questions that were addressed to me. First of all, concerning the question from the Russian colleague, we've heard many times here the word rules-based order. One of our international rules is the respect for the sovereignty and integrity of nation states. The issue we have at the moment with Russia is that we've seen in 2014 annexation of Crimea and the beginning of a hybrid war in eastern Ukraine. This is an issue we do have. We are convinced that if there are conflicts, they have to be solved at the negotiation table and not with different means. Second, collective defense will always be the transatlantic alliance, NATO, and within the transatlantic alliance we have an established format, the NATO-Russian Council, and I'm glad that we have taken up the dialogue within the NATO-Russian Council again. Third point, the European Defence Union is a defence union for European Union members, but of course the European Defence Union is open to dialogue with whoever is interested in the dialogue. We formed it mainly because there are many topics or problems that concern Europe, where Europe has to be able to act and react immediately. And within the European Defence Union, we collect and assemble the unique instruments Europe has from the military side as well from the political side as well from the economic development side. So we have a comprehensive approach to our activities. Second question, Charles Esbourg. The arc of crisis, yes, it changed its face. So if we look at the map of Europe, on the one side we have our neighbor Russia, we have our immediate neighborhood, the Near and Middle East, and we have our neighbor Africa. We have around us a region that is vulnerable and unstable, or there are conflicts and issues I was just talking about. So the word is still, or the term is still correct, but of course it changed its composition. Strategic patience, yes. I mean, if you look at the Balkan Wars, I just prolonged the KFOR mandate in the 20th year now, and it's worth it. We have a stable situation. It's still necessary that we are there. So strategic patience is necessary without any doubt. And this leads me to your third point, the jihadist terror. It is a matter of not only one generation, but generations. The topics we're talking about, be it education, be it economic development that brings jobs, and with jobs perspectives you want to work for, preventing hopelessness and despair and radicalization is a matter not only of a month, a year, or a decade, but of a generation. Third and last point, the gender dimension. Thank you for these important questions. 3 brief thoughts about that. It's a big topic, bigger than my response can be. First of all, because of what you said is right, we need diverse military forces that include women in all aspects in the fight against terror, not least through the mothers. We will reach out to the community and to the children you were talking about. Second point, we are working in whatever mandate we are or mission we are with many civil military activities to ameliorate the lives of the local community, and this is of course of the families and women and children, be it in Afghanistan, in Iraq, or in Mali, for example, in caring for water supply or investing in infrastructure where we are in a military mission. But these civil military activities where we have a specific budget for are very important for the acceptance of the population, of the local population. Same goes for the moment we have freed, for example, a village or a region from ISIL. We go immediately in to fix the houses, to bring in fresh water, to clear electricity, to bring food, to bring medical care, and in the near future jobs, because we know that we will only win the battle against terrorism if we win the heart of the population, if they have confidence that they have a positive future after having been freed from terror. Last thought of fact, you can see it in our long-lasting but important engagement in Afghanistan. The reports are often about the security situation, and these are correct reports. But if you look at the long term, when we started in Afghanistan 17 years ago, 18 years ago, 1 million children attended school. Today it's 9 million, and almost half of it are girls. You will never be able again to take away from those girls who have attended school now in the last 17 years what was given to them through education, that they can read, that they can write, that they can inform themselves. We have invested heavily in universities. We have many young women now in the universities, and they will shape the next generation of this country.
Many thanks. We now have a second surge of interest with about 8 or 9 people on our list, so I'll go through them smartly. First, Sengpan from Myanmar.
Thank you, all the speakers. My question is for the Defense Secretary of Philippines. And you mentioned in your opening that there is no footprint left in Marawi with the terrorist group. So I'm curious, how do you ensure, literally, about there is no footprint left in terms of counter mechanisms in place, given the situations that Myanmar is also going through similar situations in western part of the country where we share the border with Bangladesh. And there is a worry or a concern that it could be the next recruitment ground for the terrorists. So we would like to learn from Philippines about what are the lessons learned and the best practices that you do. And my second question is towards the Defense Minister of Germany. And being the first woman minister in your role, how different it is from your previous ministerial roles, and what are the opportunities and challenges that you have coming along, and how are you coping with it? Thank you.
John Rain.
Thank you, John. We've heard a lot of very elevated rhetoric about the fight against terrorism, and some of the agendas which the ministers have outlined are truly ambitious. It seems to me there are 3 theatres in which you're operating here. There's the domestic home theatre, the multilateral, and there's the upstream or the overseas. And if I were to say to each of the ministers, by magic, your budget has been doubled for counter-terrorism, where would you spend it?
Thank you. Dr. Koizaki.
Minister von der Leyen, you used a really interesting term, hybrid defense. And I'd be curious to hear more about the institutional components of it and how the German government organizes for that. And then I'd be interested in the other minister and the vice prime minister's sense of whether the different challenges you face on terrorism cause you to organize differently.
Thank you very much. Fleur de Villiers.
Thank you, John. It's a question really for Dr. von der Leyen. To what extent does she think that terrorism in Europe has contributed to the rise of populism across the continent? And to what extent, in effect, is this helping the terrorists achieve their goal of destabilizing Europe's democratic institutions? To the extent that we become complicit in helping the terrorists achieve their ends. If terrorism is Hydra-headed, which we have heard it is is populism not one of the Hydra's unloveliest progeny? And does this also not produce a major challenge to European institutions?
Thank you. Senior Colonel Ding Hao from China.
Thank you for your very good presentation. I have a question for Philippine Defense Minister. You mentioned that the mantras, and we know that mantras is very popular in Pakistan and Afghanistan, especially in the FATA and the tribal areas. That's why the radicalism is very popular there. And many young people go to this school and get their influenced by the radicalism. So to manage and control madrasas is very important and should be included as one of the comprehensive plans. So my question is, to do this, do you have any good suggestions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amy Sherwood.
Thanks very much. My question follows quite nicely from that one, actually. So there's been quite a lot of reference made to the rules-based international order or system. How do we reconcile protecting freedom of religion and belief, free speech, the free internet, and championing modern technologies with the fight against terrorism, extremism, and radicalisation, in particular when the lines are blurred?
Thank you very much. Peter Jennings from Australia.
Thanks, John. My question is to Minister von der Leyen. I'm interested in the line, the power of law must prevail over the law of power. Minister, of course, that has very direct resonance in the Indo-Pacific as well. And it leads me to ask, what in this new security environment is the extent of Germany's interest in wanting to engage in the security challenges of the Asia-Pacific region? There's obviously a terrorism dimension to that, but I'm interested in your views, if time allows, on your thinking about Germany and China in the context of the power of law must prevail over the law of power.
Richard Lloyd Parry.
Thank you. My question is for Minister von der Leyen, and it's about the trade tariffs recently announced by the United States. And I'd like to know, as the NATO summit approaches, how you think that these trade tensions will affect relations between the US and NATO allies on security matters. And secondly, you touched on Brexit, but I'd like to hear your thoughts in a bit more detail about what effect Brexit is going to have on the ability of European countries to implement an effective security policy in the long term. Thanks.
Thank you. Mark Fitzpatrick.
Thank you. My question is primarily to Minister Attiyah, but indirectly to others. It's a question about Iran, and I believe it's relevant to this panel on terrorism and counterterrorism because the United States accuses Iran of being the leading sponsor of terrorism. And I believe it's relevant to every nation, almost every nation represented here today, because the new Iran strategy outlined by U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo late last month relies primarily on secondary sanctions in what is a de facto economic war being waged against Iran. And in response, Iranian hardliners are encouraging their government to resume fast-paced nuclear activity and even to withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And if they do that, I believe military strikes by the United States and/or Israel would be back on the agenda. In such an air campaign, the United States may wish to use the Al Udeid air base in your country, sir. Given your country's ties to Iran, I'm curious about your take on this, and specifically, will you allow the air base in Qatar to be used in airstrikes against Iran should that eventuate? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from the Philippines, Dr. Rommel Banloy.
Thank you very much, Thank you very much, Secretary Lorenzana, for your insightful and useful presentation. But can you share with us the status of government efforts to address the daily plight and ordeal of the remaining evacuees resulting from the Marawi city siege? Because in my visit last week, like the state of Rakhine, it is a potential area for recruitment for future jihadists. And then that's one. And second, I would like to get your take on the exchanges of these militants in the Telegram, describing the Philippines as the potential home base of foreign terrorist fighters who could not return home to their own country. Thank you very much.
Many thanks indeed. So I'll take one more question, and then we will return to the panel again in the same order they've been accustomed to responding, each taking the questions that have been directed to them. So the final question, Amir Gowri from the UK.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to both the doctors on the panel. And it is referring to what Dr. Mohammed said in the beginning, that there is no single root cause. So why all terrorists are Muslims, or presumably from Muslim areas? Do you think that the continued references to mad mullahs, the madrasas, the money from the Middle East, jihad, etc., and then the attempts to fix the Muslim states in the Middle East, through war or warlike situations, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Kashmir in Pakistan, India, Libya, tomorrow maybe Iran or Saudi Arabia, I'm not sure. The questions are that is there something inherently wrong with the understanding of the issue without fully understanding the response? And secondly, do Muslims in non-Muslim states are seen as tomorrow's problem?
Many thanks indeed. So, Dr. Khalid first.
Very hot questions. Okay, I'll address first our friend John. I have to close my eyes and imagine two things before I double my budget. First of all, that our Minister of Finance fell in love with us, so we can get this financing. And the second is that I believe, and from an humble experience, that I think most of the fund should go in two directions. One, enhance education, and second, create job by create clusters of SMEs. Because, and I will link this answer directly to our honorable friend who asked about why they are all Muslims. All terrorists has nothing to do with Islam. When I see you in the morning, I say Salamu Alaikum, and Salamu Alaikum is peace be upon you, and this is the true Islam. But there is something in common. That's all the region who been either ruled by dictatorship or being deprived from their minimal rights. They get frustrated. People who does not have jobs, as I said before and now and after, lose hope. And if you get to this situation, then anything can happen. And this is nothing to do with Islam. There is a lot of acts happening around the world, but unfortunately, sometimes it's been dealt with some hypocrisy, that the people does not name things as they looks. So if you have a terrorist attack somewhere other than the Islamic world, they will call it crime, or the guy is lunatic, or he is mentally sick. But the moment it's happened in our region, immediately it will be called a terrorist attack. So we have to be very careful and draw lines on this. Iran, and this is the subject which we are all dealing with today. blame should not be in Qatar alone. We cannot change our geography. We are a neighbor with Iran. We share the largest single-walled natural gas with Iran. We are not fan of war. In Qatar, we've been calling for decades that there should be a serious engagement for a framework, regional security dialogue, so we can have a security framework where we can live side by side in peace and respect each other internal affairs. Now, we have a lot of differences with Iran. I think Qatar is more of any other GCC country has difference with Iran. We are the least who have trade with Iran, and we have, so many differences with Iran in Syria and Iraq, and this is well known to everyone. But does that mean if we have this difference with Iran, we go and fuel a war in our region? Is it wise to call the United States and to call Israel to go and fight Iran? Iran is next door. We should call Iran, put all the files on the table, and start to discuss to bring peace rather war. In my own judgment, I think the United States is wiser than to enter in a war with Iran. Maybe more pressure they are using, and maybe it will get to a result. But I think the 5+1 is a good outcome. Everyone should keep holding on this and advance with it. Now, whether any third party is trying to push the region or some country in the region to start a war with Iran, this will be very dangerous, because I am sure no one from the Western Hemisphere or countries where protected by the Western Hemisphere will go directly with Iran. Maybe they will try to push our neighbors to go against Iran, and this is dangerous. So you talk about Al-Udeid. Al-Udeid being active since 2002, and we have accomplished, not only with our friends and ally the United States, but with other countries who are present here, we have accomplished a lot against fighting terrorism in the region, and we've been very, very active on this. And I think Al-Udeid is for a good cause. It's funded for a good cause, for everyone, safety and peace and prosperity on the region. And as I told you, I don't see that United States is going to commit any war on Iran, because I know that United States is an institutional country and run by wisemanship always on this. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I'd like to address the question from Myanmar about best practices that we have learned from Marawi. Frankly, I wish Marawi did not happen, because it destroyed a whole city, displaced about 200,000 people, and caused the death of 165 soldiers and policemen, and many more civilians. But Marawi has taught us that these things could happen, and we will have just to bring all the forces of the law to suppress terrorism. But the result of those internally displaced people, we also have to deal with them. We have to put them in evacuation centers, provide their daily subsistence, hospitalizations for the sick, and temporary schools for the children. And while Marawi is still being rehabilitated, These families are now relocated into temporary housing around Marawi City, with all the amenities and all the facilities of a vibrant community, with schools, with stores. They're provided with light, water, and everything. It will take about 3 years for Marawi to be fully rehabilitated before all those people there can rebuild their homes, and so that you can go back. Now, on the question of somebody said that if my budget is doubled, where would you spend it? Well, that is shooting for the moon. But if it happens, then I will invest it on our people, on equipment to track the terrorists, to find out where they are, what they are doing, so that we can at least act proactively of what they are going to do. Third question from China talks about madrasas. Yes, the madrasas are very popular in southern Philippines, especially in Muslim areas. And as I said a while ago, our Department of Education has come into the picture again more forcefully than before. We had some mechanisms to control them as far back as 2004, but they were, not implemented fully. So we are trying to get into how they are run. Every madrasa now, madrasa school, has to get permission from the Department of Education to put up their building or schools. Their teachers are now vetted. The curriculum are now inspected, and they have to report regularly to the Department of Education. Now, to have more control over these schools, the government are subsidizing the students of these madrasas. On the question of Professor Banlawi of the Philippines, what are the government efforts on the evacuees? Yes, as I said a while ago, up to now, the government is still subsidizing all the evacuees that do not have their homes. All the businesses and livelihood in Marawi City were destroyed during the siege, and we realize or recognize that the people do not have a source of livelihood, so they are being subsidized by the government. Another one is the exchanges in the terrorist communications to make the Philippines their haven from if they lost their territory in the Middle East. Now, this information has come to us as early as 2016, and we have been monitoring it, and we know that the designated Emir of Southeast Asia, Hapilon Isnilon, moved to Lanao del Sur, but we did not anticipate that he could launch the attack too soon. And so Espilon has been killed during the Marawi siege, and all the people that he brought from Basilan to Lanao has already been killed. But we are still following one of the Abu Sayyaf leader in Sulu, the island of Sulu, and we are trying also to neutralize them there. So hopefully we have already nipped in the bud the plan of Daesh in the Middle East to establish some foothold in Southeast Asia. Thank you.
Yes, I want to refer to the first question, being the first woman as a defense minister in Germany. I try not to make a fuss about it. I think this is the most important part. Of course, I take my personal experiences into this office. I have been, before being Minister for Defense, I was 4 years Minister for Family Affairs and then 4 years Minister for Labor and Social Affairs. And I know that if you want to have in a highly developed economy brilliant personnel, you have to be very active. And of course, I know if you want to have in a modern armed forces brilliant personnel, you have to be very active. Therefore, I started immediately to improve our servicemen and servicewomen's situation at home, because I think if these men and women are risking their lives for our freedom, for our country, we should treat them at home at least as good as we treat others in our companies and in the business sector. So I introduced many of the topics that haven't been heard before, like reconciliation of work and family or other topics. Second, of course, I insist in raising the budget for modern material, independent whether the defense minister is a man or a woman. This is the main topic, because these men and women, as I said, risk their lives, and they have to be equipped in a modern and appropriate and best way. Third point, I think never before has been there has been such a cooperation between the Minister for Economic Development and the Minister of Defense, and I think this comes out of the experiences I had before in the labor market, knowing what it means specifically for young people, whether there is youth unemployment or whether there is perspective for young people, and there is no difference whether it's at home in the labor market or abroad in other countries where the defense minister is normally active. Second question, if my budget would be doubled to fight terror, I'd do three things. First of all, I spend the increase of the budget in digitalization of the systems that track down the movements of terrorists or foreign fighters or potential terrorists. We've had many deficits in Europe. What that is concerned, we improved a lot, but there's still a lot to go. So the interconnectivity of the information of who is going where and doing what is crucial. Second, I'd spend a lot of this budget in strategic communication and the social media. This is too short for an answer to explain what is going on in the social media, what recruiting is concerned and radicalization is concerned. We can do a lot, and we could do way more in a sophisticated way and counter this narrative, and then also promote our view on an open, modern society. So I would spend a lot in there. And third point, I would ask the Minister of Finance to also double the budget of my colleague, the Minister for Economic Development. The question about the hybrid answer that a hybrid attack of terror needs. Well, what have we seen? Hybrid defense. We've seen that, not only speaking about terror, but about hybrid attacks, it starts with social uproar by rumors of fake news that are distributed by trolls and bots. First point. So, work in that field and be very, have a lot of scrutiny how to dismantle the fake news and the false narratives and the rumors at a very early stage, and publish it so that the patterns are understood by the public. Second point, we've seen financial strangulation of those areas that have, or countries that have been attacked by a hybrid attack. So observe and counter the strategic financial operations. You have to include the Minister of Finance, for example, for that. Change the narrative, as I was just referring to, in the echo chambers, where the false narratives are reproduced over and over again. There are techniques to go into these echo chambers, use their language to change slowly but surely the narrative and the conversation in those typical echo chambers you want to fight. Of course, you need military instruments, and I will not refer again, because I did it before, but it's the most important one, go in the reconstruction topic immediately when you started to counter a hybrid attack by reconstructing those areas where that have been freed. Does the terror in Europe contribute to the rise of populism? Was one question. I think it is a small piece in the mosaic, but it's certainly not the only cause. The cause of the rise of right-wing populist movements is way more complex. But what both have in common is they need enemies to pour out their hate on the enemies, and both therefore live of the existence of the others. Right-wing populist movements pour out a lot of hate against the Muslim world and take as a stakeholder falsely terror, jihadist terror, and vice versa. Of course, so the absurd situation is that both can live with the hate. The other one is pouring out to take it as an example to show to their supporters that their false narrative is presumably right. There was a question about the trade tariffs and the NATO summit. I think we should not mix the topics for a very good reason. NATO is an alliance based on defending our common values, and these have been pronounced here many times. It's the rule of law, it's the democracy, it's defending human rights, it's the open society, and NATO is an alliance that says every single member of this alliance will be defended when being attacked, independent, whether it's small or big, whether it's strong or weak, independent of its economic situation, for example. We've done very well by sticking to these principles over the last 70 years. This will go on. But within these last 70 years, we had many issues between our NATO members, be sure. And there was a lot of debate and discussions whether the one or the other is right or wrong. So, therefore, I take the tariffs as one of these topics we debate. Of course, why not? But it doesn't change anything concerning the fundamental basis we're standing on together in NATO. Brexit, effect on defense. We're still very sorry about the Brexit referendum, and it's neither good for our British friends nor is it good for the European Union. But the topic that is concerned the least by Brexit is security, because we do have NATO. So there's a well-established strong alliance between the European Union members and our British friends, and this will go on.
Thank you very much. Well, we've had 3 excellent statements, a lot of sharp questions, and a great deal of thoughtful answers. So I would invite you all to thank our 3 speakers for having inspired both.